Hey, welcome to the John Gardina classroom. And today I have an extremely special guest from South Dakota, Isaac Full. How you doing, brother?
Good, John. How are you doing this evening?
Excellent. Well, I'm going to give a little background about Isaac, and we're going to go into a time period like pre-adolescent, and then we're going to start there. So Isaac is from Minnesota. His parents were divorced at 2 years old. He has a brother, and he lived with his mom until about 14 years old. Growing up, same sports, baseball, football that I played. I did not do pond hockey in Cleveland, but he did in Minnesota, where all those lakes are. And then during his childhood, just living with his mother, he really did not have a male role model in his life. So he became addicted to porn between the ages of like 9 to 14 before he lived with his dad. And then he ran into some addictions after that period with living with his dad. But before we get started into the addiction, Isaac, I just want to say I'm extremely grateful that you're here today and that your story is so impactful. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on to share it, just to tell people, especially young men or men who are older, how important it is to have a role model in their life to free them of these addictions so they can live a fulfilled life. So, Isaac, you can start wherever you want, but I'm just extremely blessed that you're here today.
I'm so thankful that you've asked me to be on this, John. This is going to be an amazing experience and a wonderful ride that you and I are going to partake on this here little journey that we're about to start. So,
Yeah, I'm
appreciate
excited, man.
appreciate the introduction. Like John said, grew up in Minnesota. I live in central South Dakota now. Just had my first son in December, little Asher. I have been married June 25th was 3 years. So
Congratulations, man.
um
That's awesome.
yeah, it's an amazing journey. It's been beautiful. So to hear the words of addiction and pornography and low male role models as a kid growing up to reminisce now and look into the future of where I am and where I've come through and what I've come through is a truly beautiful experience, man. It's just so cool to be a married man and a husband and a father of a nice little boy. It's really, really cool. Really cool.
Well, just watching your story, not only through Instagram, but through the High Valued Men on school, the community, and learning more about you, I was like, man, this guy he's put it together. And being a high valued man that you are now, it took a while to get there. So today you're going to paint the picture of the hell and tribulations you went through and sort of why and how it all happened. So, Isaac, go back to when you were living with your mom and you're 9 or 10 years old and when that pain point of addiction started.
So when I was as a child, with my mom and my dad being divorced before I really had any of my first memories, um, I was I've been I was massively confused about that for a really long time and always searched for uh proverbial answer as to like what happened, why is this my life, why do my friends live with their parents and have these amazing vacations and do all of these beautiful things as a family. um and that was really a deep struggle for me as a little boy, like
Yeah.
as a little boy I feel like our father should be our hero, and to have your father be your hero and a true superhero in your eyes, but to not have him present on a very regular basis inside the home was extremely difficult for me. um
I can only
Nothing
imagine. Yeah,
against.
Isaac. No,
Yeah,
no, I understand because well, I was in your shoes, but I've worked with many young adults and adults who did not have a father figure, or even if they were there, they weren't present with them, and
yeah,
a lot of questions arise, like you had, of why and the comparison of how are my friends going on these nice vacations, or it seems like their dad's playing catch with them or coaching them, and then you didn't have that. So that's
Yeah.
tough.
No, you're good. You're good, man. So, nothing against my mom. Never knock on women who are raising young boys. None of that. I mean, my mom is an absolute rock star. She worked 40-hour work weeks to support my brother and I. Always had food on our table. Always had a roof over our head. We're never homeless. Never wondering if we were going to be able to eat. Um, Definitely pretty skinny on some of the holidays that most people were partaking in. Um, but my mom is a beautiful soul, beautiful woman for the amount of energy and effort she put into raising my brother and I. She did absolutely the max that she could while keeping the lights on and food on the table, honestly. But in that, working 40-hour work weeks, 9 to 5s, Friday or Monday through Fridays, as little boys living in a city with little adult supervision, ruckus was created, man. Like, we just found our way to keep ourselves um entertained, you could say. Wasn't always legally entertained. A lot of mischief happened, and to not have a dominant male role model like my dad should have been in that circumstance, um a lot of discipline, youthful discipline, was missed, and the ability to just run rampant was certainly at the forefront. I could never imagine being my mom at the age that she was, trying to raise two young boys. Not that she was 16 with two kids, but mid 20s, trying to work on a career, doing all of the adult stuff, trying to wrangle two little boys where she didn't have the opportunity to be home with us on a regular basis. And that just caused a lot of issues. We found ourselves, both my brother and I, in circumstances with a, a pretty rough young crowd, from filling our pockets with candy bars at the local corner store to like bottles of booze before 12 years old and down our pants legs, right? Like, just
Yeah.
going wild, man.
Well, it's the wild, wild west, as we put it.
Yeah.
And when you don't have discipline or don't have someone who's present in the home, and again, this is nothing against your mother; she was doing the best she could,
Yeah.
but you gravitate towards other individuals, usually boys, who are in the same boat you are. And when that happens, you're going to do things that aren't as ethical or moral because you always stretch the boundaries of how far I can go before we get caught. Was it kind of like that situation?
Absolutely, man. And not only like stretch the boundaries, but just like I've I've really reflected on this a lot in the last year, and just how I've equated this in my mind is just Peter Pan and the Lost Boys, man. Like,
Yeah.
just going to Never Land and fighting Captain Hook and no parents and living this great life. However, I mean, with that kind of crowd and surroundings, the education that you're getting from other lost little boys is not is not the quality a youthful education that we should be implementing on our young individuals in our world. And
There's and
to
Isaac, I'm going to add to that because when you have discipline and focus from a parent or role models, you have a true north, a plumb line. And it sounds to me when you're saying, the lost boys, the compass is all over the place where you just
Yeah.
freedom to do whatever you want. If you get caught, so what? It is what it is. You're in a band together, almost like a gang, but not that you were. But it's just where you have a band of brothers who you're just going out and exploring. That's really what it was,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And whatever that expiration looked like was pretty wild at times. So that was up until I was 14 years old, with my parents being divorced when I was 2, like we said. Um, the typical court order through the early 80s, maybe still now, I don't know, but was to give the children the opportunity to select their parent once they turned 12 years old. At least this was my story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a brother that, like we said, 2 years younger than I am, so I couldn't leave my little brother when I turned 12. I stayed with my mom until I was 14 years old. And at 14 years old, the massive amount of changes that little boys go through into becoming men, going through puberty and testosterone to start to flow, and what you thought was running wild and rampant before that testosterone started to flow definitely ramped up from that time period on 14 until 22 years old. It's wild. It's a wild story, man.
Isaac,
Um,
I know because being a teacher, I teach in a middle school now, and I see it where I help a lot of young men, and when they don't have fathers, just like in your situation, they tell me stories too that it's just like, oh my goodness. But the difference is I try to be a shepherd to them and a positive role model to help guide them to the consequences of their decisions. But to me, it sounded like even when you went to live with your dad, he was in construction and wasn't home. So you have these hormones raging. You're off, doing some drugs, you know, pornography and all these things, and had an addictive personality. Is that true?
yeah,
And
ab- yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's still very present in my life right now. The addictive personality.
mhm.
That's I don't know if I will ever be able to break away from the addictive personality. I just channel that energy in positive and healthy directions now. Um, but
Is
yeah,
there
so go ahead.
Isaac? Is there during this time between like 14 when you moved in with your dad to 22, and we'll get to what next phase happened for you. But can you kind of paint a story or a picture for everyone of like what you went through so people can kind of relate what you were going through during that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, my dad worked road construction. He would leave the house on Monday morning at 6 o'clock and typically wouldn't come home until Friday evening. And like my wife Morgan and I have had multiple conversations about this, and I'm free to say this, and I say it with confidence. Like, my dad's been a functional alcoholic for my whole life. He's there. I Very few days in my adult life do I remember my dad not drinking at least a couple beers to end the day. And I mean, my dad's not sitting here getting popped every single night, by no means in capacity, but to have that be a very predominant part of his life has been something that I was surrounded by my whole life. So, um, 14 years old, move in with my dad, working road construction, gone all week. Was blessed to move into a circumstance where my dad had a roommate at the time, and this gentleman kind of was like my first real mentor and kept my brother and I busy during the summertime as much as he could, not being our dad. There was no discipline that was ever instilled by him, like physical discipline or like groundings or anything like that, but work discipline. So he had his own construction company, and he was gracious enough to allow my brother and I to tag along with his construction company. They did some road work, they did some other kinds of odds and ends type stuff, and that's kind of where I really started to be ingrained in having a quality work ethic. And I think as I think back on those days in my life, like, work ethic was never one of my weaknesses. I've always had a strong work ethic, but I've always had a very addictive and a very distracted personality as well. So, um, to
Would you?
have Kurt in our lives and like leading us down a path with small farm work and road construction stuff like that with him was a true blessing, but wasn't enough. So, um,
So when you
yeah,
went through school, um, would you have considered yourself a young man who had maybe ADHD, who couldn't really focus during school, or just didn't maybe care about school that much because your life seemed like, you know what, I'm still that lost boy and I don't really have a mission of where I want to go after high school?
yeah. I mean, if I would have sat down with a clinical psychologist, they probably would have been like, "Yeah, bro,
Yeah.
we're gonna get you some medication. We're gonna slow you down a little bit so that we can get you on the right track." However, on that same note is like my first introduction to an upper was Ritalin. Like I had a friend
Yeah.
that I would get buy pills or he would give me his Ritalin, and I mean that was my first introduction to an upper, and that's like chemical. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild, wild, wild to be a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid and have that as means of something in your life, right? Like there's another broken connection with another broken young man that's doing something along the same lines that I am for connection because we're both lost and trying to figure out who can we surround ourselves with that's going to be in our pain with us.
Yeah.
Um
Man, I'm sorry you went through that, and it sounded like your dad's friend, working with him was an opportunity for you to work with your hands, learn a skill set, and then you got hurt on the job at 22, and then things shifted from there, right? Go ahead and tell that story.
yeah, so to get through high school, I did graduate high school. There was 89 kids in my class. I graduated 87 out of 89. So like my my goal as a young teenager was to graduate high school. Like I knew that if I didn't graduate high school, life was going to be far more painful than what it already was. So I focused. I didn't get good grades, but I was at school and I took I took pride in getting my diploma and graduating from high school. That was something that was very important to me. So I made sure that I did that. And to think about, here's this young man that's going through all of these wild things from sniffing Ritalin and eventually turning into a full blown methamphetamine addiction to like having a first name basis conversations with the lady and guy who owned the video store in town when I would go and like sneakily rent porno videos and stuff like that. It's like here's this young man that's like in it felt like I was in one of those giant bubble suits and I'm just running around smashing stuff, right? But I can't get out of the bubble suit because everybody that's outside of there is like, hey, we just want to give you a hug. Come and let us give you a hug and show you that there's more to life than what you're doing right now and you can be a successful person. But I just couldn't get out. I didn't have the fortitude, the discipline, the mental
Well,
capacity to break myself out of that until I mean I got hurt at work and um crazy my dealer lived on the highway. Like I drove
jeez.
past my dealer's house every single day to work, right? And once I got hurt at work, I just went on a complete bender. 22 years old, my brother's graduated from high school, going to college now, getting a degree. He's in a very deep relationship with his high school sweetheart. Like I, I knew they were going to get married eventually, just didn't know what that time period, what that frame was going to look like. And here am I, a single dude getting high for 5, 6 days at a crack and like locking myself in the house, watching porn and just dinking around in a small Midwest town and just lost nothing, zero.
So
Um,
I want to speak on those pain points of behaviors you had. So during this time, you didn't have a role model to help direct you where to go. So you were kind of just floating, and your identity was. And again, stop me wherever you think I'm wrong in saying this. I'm just trying to decipher from my observations of what you said.
Yeah.
So you're floating around. You're addicted to drugs, hanging out with just really same sort of kids, right?
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
you start the comparison game when your brother you see started to be on a more of a straight and narrow path by going to college and had a steady relationship. So it was almost a blessing when you got hurt at 22 to say you went through a deep depression. And I want you to speak about that right after this, though. You go through this real dark period and you made a decision which really altered your life. So go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, we've been on this point of this massive drug addiction, and I just partied, and but yeah, it looks great. I'm raving. I'm having a great time. It all looks great on the outside until I go home, and then it's like I'm sitting in the house by myself, still drinking booze and doing meth alone. And that was really, really, like you said, just a really dark, depressive state and point in my life where I had some quality people in my life, but just ignorant, stubborn, like just a bullheaded little boy trapped inside a man's body and couldn't figure out a way to get out until I got hurt. And then I had both of my grandfathers served in the military. My grandfather on my mom's side was in the Army Air Force in World War II, and my grandfather on my dad's side served in the Korean War. So I mean, I had some of that like look for those stories and that connection with my grandfathers when I was a little kid. Like my mom's dad never talked to her or my grandmother or her sisters about any of his time in World War II, but my grandfather like was very vocal and verbal with me about all of the things that he went through, which was very interesting. Here I am, this young boy before my grandfather passed away, having no idea what he's really truly talking about, but instilling in my brain like this kind of an itch that's at the back of my head that I hadn't figured out a way to scratch yet until I mean I stayed awake for 5 or 6 days very regularly, John, just high, and then I would sleep for a few days, just lock myself in my bedroom, and one day after about 3 months after I got hurt at work, I did the same thing, partied and slept, and woke up one morning and just walked into the living room where my dad was. He was on his unemployment time from work in the wintertime. Don't no road construction in the upper Midwest in the wintertime. It snows here, so things get frozen,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Can't
Oh
can't
yeah.
push dirt. Can't push dirt in the freezing weather. So, um, my dad would spend the winters at home with us. But yeah, I just told my dad like I'm going somewhere, and I didn't tell him where I was going, and I firmly truly believe like where I was in that circumstance and situation. I think my dad thought I was going to go and commit suicide. I think he was like that. I don't know what to do with my son. I have no connection with him. I've tried and I throw my hands up in this and I give it away. And I went and talked to an army recruiter that morning and just like, dude, I don't know what needs to happen, but I got to get out of here in the next give the quickest time period that you can get me on a plane to get inside the army. I need to be on that plane. And he asked if I could pee clean and pass a urinalysis. It's like, no way, man. There's
No.
no way I'm going to do that. He said, come back in 30 days and we'll give you your analysis and we'll do the physical test with you and see if you're capable. And I locked myself in the house for right at 30 days and totally disassociated with all of the people that I was running around with from the time that I was 14 until 22 years old. And just I stayed home. cleaned myself up, got sober, and yeah, when he called and asked if I would be able to pass a urinalysis, I was like, I don't know, but I'm willing to pee. I haven't done anything in the last 3 weeks, so pulled me in. I did the urinalysis. Everything was green lights, and in 2 weeks, I was on my way. So
Hey Isaac,
join
one
the
thing, yeah, you joined the army after
yeah,
your clean period. Was there a time or a thought that you had in your head? I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, where you just said, that's enough. I'm done. And then what really drove you to have the discipline to do that? Was just because you knew you were in such a bad state that you knew this was going to end bad? Like this was going to be my life forever. I can't live like this. And you said, I have
yeah,
to do this for me. Is that kind of how it went down?
absolutely. Yeah, it was prison or death, John. Honestly,
Yeah, that's what.
that's what I seen, and those were where I was at the time. I mean, I'm driving around in Minnesota's zero tolerance for methamphetamine at the time, and I'm sitting here driving around in my car with methamphetamine on me every single day. And had I ever got pulled over, I mean, my eyes are looking as big as flying saucers all the time. Just freaking, I'm an open book. I'm rural Midwest kid with eyes that are bugging out of his head. I mean, there's no way I'm escaping that. I'm going to prison. Like that's just gonna be that's the story. Um,
Well,
or
good thing. Yeah, good thing you didn't, or OD'd or had a real bad situation with a drug deal or whatever. Because all these things could happen, and people have to
absolutely,
understand that. And I want very very clearly when I say this, like when you deal with drugs and you any transaction, um, whether it's your impairment or those really unhealthy relationships, you're always flirting with something bad to happen.
yeah,
And by the
yeah,
grace of God, none of that happened for you, Isaac. And you came to the sober realization that it was present or death. And I'm going to get myself sober so that I can start this new journey. And hey, right there is what people need to do. Just like you took control of your thoughts and your behaviors, and you turned a new page in your story of your life. And damn it, I'm proud of you that you did that, because or else we wouldn't be here today.
absolutely, yeah. Thank you for that, John. I mean, yeah, it's life is pain, right? And it just comes down to how tolerant of the pain you want to be and how deep in that pain you choose to sit and the duration that you choose to sit there. Right? So I mean you can sit there and wallow in that pain and that suffering for your whole life if you so choose, but at 22 years old you have a world. The world
Yeah.
is in front of you. There's so much there to have, to be explored, to just it's not at 40 years old, it's not too late, John. It's never
It's
too
true.
late to pull the plug and to just reevaluate and say, "Hey, there's so much more to life than what I've been blessed with so far." I've been truly blessed because my circumstance hasn't put me in a grave or a jail cell yet. So let's let's refocus this energy and go in a direction that's positive and make a real quality impact on this world because we all have that. It's innate. It's in us.
It it is, and what happened is when you went to the deep valley of your life during this period before you joined the army was you decided to rewrite your story, like you just said. And no matter how old you are, 18, 30, 40, doesn't matter. What Isaac's trying to say is you have an opportunity right now, listening to this, to stop those poor behaviors that you're exuding and to change the trajectory or path of where you want to go. And it's really just comes down to the discipline and fortitude of having a vision for where you want to go, surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded, who are going to bring you there faster so that you can have this journey to become a reality. And for you to go into the army and looking at your grandfathers was something that you saw yourself. It's really what happens is a self-professed prophecy that we have is when we learn from our past, we take it within us and we create this new identity of who we want to become. So this rerunning of your story, really, Isaac, was wonderful because then you got to partake in something while being in the Army and serving overseas in Afghanistan, and having these experiences where you never would have had that before if you just would have went in the same. And by the way, so very clearly, like I said earlier, probably would have ended in a bad situation of prison, death, or some other unforeseen circumstance.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's at 22 years old when I got to basic training was the first time in my life where I felt like I truly had a clean slate. Like I have nothing in front of me. Like I have a 4-year obligation to this. I signed my name to the contract. I'm here. I'm doing this. And I get to define what this next 4 years of my life looks like. And whatever that definition looks like is what the rest of my life ultimately is going to look like, as long as I pay attention to the discipline, the skills, and the qualities that this type of environment is going to instill in me. That happens for people all the time in different capacities: sports when they're kids, youth groups at church, doing all of these other things. We can check into that. We have that capability to have that blank slate in front of us, and that open book that says, here's the pen and the paper. Write your story. This is beautiful. You have the opportunity to do this. So yeah, I wasn't any high speed military guy. I didn't do anything fancy while I was in the military. I was in the field artillery, so got to train on some pretty cool pieces of equipment. Got to do some really cool things while I was in. Like you said, I deployed to Afghanistan in 2009, and then came home. And my unit was actually at Fort Hood when the
Hmm.
Fort Hood massacre happened. Like, right, that
Wow.
happened to my unit as we were in processing. So that's crazy, man, to be fresh off of a deployment, first deployment, 23, 24 years old, and in a place where you feel like you're supposed to be safe, and an absolute maniac comes through and just does something audacious because of something bad that happened to them in their past. Man, it's crazy. Or the
That
way
is
that they think or see something. I don't understand that.
well, we can't control what people's mindsets are to drive them to do
Yeah.
something that's that insane to do. But in the irony of having that happen during the time that you were there, but during your 4 years that you served, I'm sure you learned a lot of discipline, camaraderie, how to have a mission mindset, to have success. And then after serving for the 4 years, you went ahead and you came back in the States, and you moved to South Dakota. Is that correct? And when you got
Yep.
out of the
So
Army?
so when I got out in, yeah, just to speak on that quick, the brotherhood, the camaraderie, that was something that I never experienced in my entire life. Like a group of individuals, all individuals until we put on the same uniform, and then we are working towards one common objective, which was something that I had never experienced in my life. And to have individuals from all over the country, different backgrounds, different cultures, different everything, to put on the same clothing, hat, boots, the same way, put one pant leg on, the other pant leg on, you put one sleeve in, zip up, put your hat on, tie your boots the same. All of us are the same. Our stories are different, yeah, but we're all the same people. It's just so, that was so enlightening for me to be surrounded by people like that, to know that no matter what my narrow mindedness was coming from a small community in the Midwest, when I got out of that narrow mindedness mentality and just looked at people for who they were, it's beautiful, John. It was so amazing to be surrounded in that kind of space with individuals that were working for a common goal.
Well, you think
And
about it
like
in context, Isaac. Think
good.
about it, and I always have this analogy: is that you are in this barren soil, weeded, full, just a toxic soil, and then you uproot yourself into a new environment where the soil is rich with people who are on the same page as you, getting, you know, that camaraderie, like you said, same mission mindset, um, doing something together, and something you never had before, which set you up for such great value system of learning how it works together as a team. And that's what people have to understand is, like, when we are in isolation, the devil prowls in our mind.
Yeah,
When
man.
we are
Yeah.
around a team, when we're surrounded, it's almost like you have this shield around you because they are protecting you from that isolation that you would have had an attack from the devil. It's just what it is. So people who are listening, like, when you are by yourself, bad things happen, and it all starts in your mind. So when you're around somebody else, at least one other person who has the same mission as you, or the same um, principles as you, is you're going to be protected, and you move forward in progress with that when that happens. So that alignment is a great thing to expand on, Isaac, and I'm glad you found that during those years.
Yeah. And I mean, I was just such a true blessing, and a blessing in disguise, honestly, to have the foresight to say, hey, I need to remove myself from this circumstance, and I'm going to inject myself into this new circumstance and see what happens and what comes from it. So my unit moved from Fort Hood to Fort Knox, and we were getting ready to redeploy back to Afghanistan. And my brother was now going to get married in 2011. And I couldn't miss my brother's wedding. So I was at the end of that first 4 year obligation in the military, and my unit was gonna deploy. My reenlistment, I was in my reenlistment window, and my I had to reenlist before I could redeploy because my contract was going to expire before the end of that deployment, and I got out. I said I am so thankful and appreciative of all the opportunities that I've gotten to take while being in the military and serving my country, but my family is where my creed lies, and
Mm,
I got myself out of the military so that I could be home for one day for my brother and my sister's wedding. Um,
that's
but in
awesome,
that
by the way.
process,
That is a great,
yeah,
that's a noble man that you did
yeah,
that.
you know, you give your. I did. I was good. I had a very bright future in the military. I was doing all of the right things. I was going to all the right schools. I was doing all the. I had a future. It was a quality career, and it was the first time in my life where I had something that I could really hang my hat on and be proud of what I was doing. And I stepped away from that graciously to be surrounded by my family and to just give my love to my family in that space and that support. However, leaving the military and this space opens up this little playground of like, okay, you're going back home now. What are you going to get yourself into? And I didn't take my foot off the gas pedal. I enrolled in college at South Dakota State University and used my post 9/11 GI Bill benefits to get a full ride to college. Um, and I graduated, first one in my family to graduate with a bachelor's degree. So I got a bachelor's in science in wildlife and fisheries science. I've always been, you the one common thread through my whole life, John, that I can just, if I can just go back to it, is my passion, my love for the outdoors and things that are wild. To get that never dulled, dimmed for me through any of my darkest days, where I would find my solace and my little come back to earth time was chasing a bird dog, shooting pheasants, or sitting in a tree stand hunting deer. Man, that was like, and I'm still there. Like that's where I'm at in life still. So that's
And
one
Isaac,
of those common
yeah,
threads.
which is great because everyone does need to hear that is your passion that you've had your entire life is magnified and is so great now because when you went to school, you knew that what your interests were
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
being in the outdoors and getting a bachelor's degree in wildlife and fishery from South Dakota State. So you knew you were on point based on your interest of what you felt most at peace and passionate about. So you get your
I was
degree, right? And in South Dakota State, and you said top of your class, and which is amazing to go from high school where you had no real mission, just which was to graduate, but then you go to
yeah.
South Dakota State and you're like, this is great because this is something I love, right? It was
Yeah.
totally different in just maybe that 10-year period, which is awesome. So go ahead and
Yeah.
tell us um, after you graduated and going through that program and excelling there, uh, what came after?
Yeah, so I was very, very intentional, like you said, going into college. I was going to get a job in something that was going to give me the opportunity to create a financial means doing something that I truly had a passion for and love, which
Yeah.
is so amazing. I mean, to live in a space in life right now is so simple. There's so much out there for people if you're just very, very intentional and disciplined. If you have that mindset that says, this is what I want to do with my life, and you just don't let anything stop you to go and get it. You can, it's true. You can manifest and believe and do the work to get anything that you want out of this short period of time that we're here. Um, so yeah, I actually came to central South Dakota. I live just north of the state capital Pier on the Missouri River. And I was drawn here because I had a family member that lived out here in this area. And while I was in the military and in college, she was sending me pictures of these giant white-tailed deer that she was killing every fall. So I was like, hey, I'm gonna have to go check this spot out. I came out here, and the second time that I came out here, I killed a 180 plus inch whitetail on public land, like land that's accessible to everybody. Anybody could get a tag and go to that space and be in that place at that time and could have killed that deer. And as soon as that happened, I was hooked. Like this is the space for me. This is where I want to be. This is where I'm going to plant my roots. And when I graduated from college, a job with an organization called Pheasants Forever opened up here in Gettysburg, the county that I shot that deer in. And yeah, man, it's crazy. This is a
It's
God thing, right?
it is a
So
God thing.
yeah, so I interviewed for that job. I had worked internships with our state agency, Game Fish and Parks, for the 4.5 years that I was in college, and did some really cool things. Had some really, really great teachers, some great leaders that worked for the agency that just instilled a massive amount of knowledge and passion into me for all things natural, far beyond just like sitting in a tree stand and hunting and learning about how to kill a nice deer or learning how to hunt pheasants in a more creative capacity, whatever that looks like. But just like a real solid base of where all of us come from. So like the soil and how important the soil is to our quality of life from the standpoint of growing the plants for the food that we eat or the plants for the animals that we eat because they all eat the plants or having clean air and clean water. Like all of these things were really truly instilled in me through that time, and that's only just grown now for me as I've continued on in my career. But um yeah, so I moved to central South Dakota, Gettysburg, and started as a private lands biologist working with this organization, Pheasants Forever, working with landowners to implement federal programs and assistance on their properties to enhance um, soil quality, water quality, and air quality using uh, typically revolved around removing non-productive agricultural acres out of their farm practice and implementing some sort of habitat parameters into those unproductive areas with a subsidy from the federal government to turn some of those acres that weren't turning a profit and were a red on the business books of the farm into a green.
Mm.
And I just got to meet so many amazing people and work on so many amazing projects doing that. Just really, really, really enjoyed that. Um, but that evolved. So to back up just a little bit, before I moved to Gettysburg, when I got out of the Army, my contract required a 2-year stint with the Minnesota National Guard, closest unit to my home of record. And when I was in the National Guard, I met a gentleman named Travis and befriended Travis, and Travis and I became best friends. And well, I'll get into why that's important here. But in 2019, I was starting to feel like I had met my max capacity in the work that I was doing, in the area that I was working. So I was faced with a decision: either create something that was going to allow me to kind of pivot and go in a direction of something more that I wanted to do, or pick myself up and move away from the place where I really loved living. And um, through that time that I had moved to Gettysburg, small rural South Dakota town. I mean, there's more cows in this county than there is people. I met a really beautiful woman and had a very grand vision for what our life was going to look like during the rest of our lives, essentially, is what my mind was telling me. And that relationship just didn't pan out. I mean, I was still in this space of kind of like figuring myself out. I mean, I'm always going to be trying to figure myself out, but I was leaving some of the most important things that a woman needed from me way, way back behind me. And she just wasn't into that kind of thing at that point in time in life. So, um, where my mind was in that relationship and where her mind was in that relationship were completely different spaces. I thought we were going to get married and we were going to do the family thing and we were going to have this amazing thing in this relationship. And when that dissolved, that was extremely painful for me. I was 35 years old and, I was 32 years old. And it's like, okay, I live in central South Dakota. There's
Right.
0 people here. My opportunities of finding a quality woman are so small because I don't associate myself with going out to the bars every single weekend. I'm not into that anymore. I would much rather just spend my time by myself than be surrounded and pulled back into the space where I've just spent the last 10 years of my life fighting so freaking hard to get away from. Um, but then when that relationship dissolved, that just kind of focused me back into my career because I had gotten a little aloof in what I was doing for work because I was just trying to juggle too many things and do this and do that, and I was not being a quality member of the team. I wasn't out. My output for work was getting really bad. My boss was starting to see that, and he proposed me an opportunity in 2019 at my annual review, and he said, "Write me a proposal for your dream job."
Mm.
So I wrote a proposal for my dream job in 2019, and my dream job was to find a way to be able to deliver inside the organization, inside the mission of Pheasants Forever, getting new individuals into the outdoors or lapsed individuals into the outdoors and finding a way to bring their families along with them. So a thing that we're starting to see, like there's this trend that's going on in the outdoor space right now. It's a $1 billion tax revenue space. Everybody looks like you and I do, and they're 70 years old. 70-year-old guys are not buying shotguns. They're not buying hunting license. They're not getting into the outdoors anymore. Those chapters of their life are starting to close, and we're finding ourselves in a space where the backfill hasn't happened. There's a big gap, and it's scary from a conservation standpoint because because of the massive gap that we have. So there's a lot of resources that are going into this thing that's called R3 now: recruit, retain, and reactivate. And my proposal was to find funding for an R3 outreach coordinator for the state of South Dakota with focus on veterans and military personnel. I had started to really ingrain myself in my community. It's the first time I lived in a place where I unpacked my bags, John. Like I hadn't lived in a place for so long that I didn't feel like I was ready to move, right? Like here I am, this little boy, court ordered, 12 years old, you can move with your dad. Well, in the future I'm going to move. Then I move with my dad and I'm 14, and it's like, okay, well, 14 to 18 you're going to graduate high school and you're supposed to do the man thing and get out of the house, so you're going to move. And then join the military and you're going to move. Go to college, you're going to graduate from college, you're going to move. So like I found myself in a place where I really found a community that I loved being in, and a place where I established myself as a member of the community here. And being a veteran, I joined my local VFW and was blessed to work with a VFW post that has the ability to bring 5 veterans, Purple Heart recipient veterans from all over the country, to central South Dakota to do a 5-day all paid pheasant hunt. I mean, like, we're living in the pheasant capital of the world. People come from all over the world to hunt pheasants in South Dakota. And our post has the financial capacity to be able to host something like this. And through that, I was able to see full-grown men, Vietnam veterans specifically, who were just reinvigorated by getting like having a place to go and be outside again, and finding intricate ways to develop means for individuals who were missing a limb or couldn't walk anymore, and getting them into the outdoors and being able to provide this experience for them. And the immense emotional gratitude that was reciprocated from that small gesture, and that passion that I've had since I was a little kid, and the post members here in Gettysburg, what we have as individuals for being in the outdoors, to have that instilled in me through this time and these opportunities with these men, going back to having this ability to write a proposal for my dream job. And I really scoped it around providing opportunities for that to just grow from 10 individuals, or from 5 individuals a year, to 10 to 25, to how many ever I can feasibly manage and provide a quality experience for. So
So
now
Isaac, yeah. So yeah, right now you started R3. What year was that?
that was in 2019 is when I wrote that proposal.
Okay, so this
So
first group of men you had was what year did that start?
they were here in 2017.
Okay. Okay.
So
So
yeah,
that
so I
started a little
moved to
earlier.
Gettysburg.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I moved to Gettysburg in 2016 and worked as a
Okay.
private lands biologist from 16 until 21. And then from 21 until now, I've been in this R3 capacity.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So
And just for time's sake, I want I think it's so important for what you're doing, and it's amazing how the passion of what you had when you were a child of being outdoors and then joining the military and then blending the two of these veterans coming to hunt and being in a place that you love, but also helping the environment is it's just amazing how it all came
Yeah.
full circle. And the greatest thing is like you are the center, one of the center pieces of this whole puzzle to make it work, which is astonishing, Isaac.
Yeah. So when I reversed there for a second and brought up Travis
Mm-hmm.
and my relationship with Travis, and in 2019 Travis took his life. Like that, this is my
Man.
best friend. I'm talking to this dude every day. We're making plans, like we're living life together, doing amazing things, and this like out
Hmm.
of left field circumstance and experience happens in my life, right? And Isaac before the military, Isaac before all of these things would have spiraled out of control to lose his best friend. But I've just really taken the pain of that and the unknown of the things that I missed, the things that we missed as a family, the things like all of these things that just don't have answers and will never be answered. I've turned that into a real positive energy. And that's where like this passion for this R3 and working with these veterans and military personnel and their families and getting them in the outdoors. I know what the outdoors can do for therapy. I've seen it and I missed being able to provide that opportunity to my best friend.
Well,
And
this is deep, Isaac, because what you're doing is such a it's a phenomenal thing you're doing. Uh Working with kids and this is God intervening right now because
yeah, man.
and I'll tell you why because it's going to hit home right here. Ready? A really close friend of mine and one of my former baseball players who I coached was in the military and he died at just this week ago. I don't know all the circumstances of what happened and how he died, but he died. And I'm thinking about what you're saying right now and how impactful it is for someone who's dealing with trauma at losing his best friend. And I just want to be like, man, I want to take you right now and send him, my young friend, send him out there with you to just be at peace in nature and to have therapy. And I think it's so powerful what you're doing. I would love to see this expanded just from not only veterans, but also people who truly need something, who went through a traumatic experience. And I don't know if that's a vision of yours or, but man, that'd be a powerful.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a dreamer now, John. Like I've got an amazing vision. I've got an amazing dream to have positive impact, and whether that's inside the organization of Pheasants Forever or that dissolves, whatever that looks like. Like I'm gonna find. I've created this
That's you.
mechanism now, and I have this passion. I'm gonna find a way to keep this thing going into the future. And
And I
it's,
want
I
to
mean,
add,
it's an
and I want to add, Isaac, for what you're saying is, I have read your material and how impactful it's been when you lay out the reflection of after an experience with gentlemen, and it's powerful. And to see that expand exponentially to other areas of just non-veterans is something that I think God will bless because I know it's needed so greatly. And I pray that it happens for you and for all those future individuals who will be with you on that journey. Um, and the one thing I also want to say is before we end here is I want you just to finalize not only your vision of what you've started in this organization, but about what's so important to you with your wonderful wife and your son Asher. I
yeah,
want to end
man.
there because that's really the root of how God has put us together, and family is such an important piece of it. That you went from being isolated to now be a full-fledged father who's present with your son and having your wife by your side in this journey. So I want to end on this high note. Not that everything else hasn't
Yeah,
been, but it's been
absolutely.
great.
Yeah, I mean, it's my story, John, and it's a sad, painful story, but it I feel like it resonates with so many people because
It does.
I lived in isolation for so long and I white knuckled it and I was a lone wolf for so long trying to just figure this freaking thing out. And it's amazing to pull yourself out of that and the to be able to pull yourself out of that and recognize the blessings that are in life if you will just accept them into your life. Like we said, I have an amazing, beautiful wife, which is probably a whole nother podcast on the other side, man. Like the story to how we met is such a God thing. We met on a hiking trip. She's from Ontario, Canada. I'm living in central South Dakota. There's no feasible reason as to why we're supposed to be in the same place at the same time. To me, having the gall to just get up and go and introduce myself to this beautiful woman who was by herself
Mm.
and just like this rocket ship that we've been on since, um and
It's
to get married, to be in this amazing commune with my wife, and it's the most beautiful but the hardest job that I've ever had in my life, to be a husband. It's um it is amazing. It is amazing. It's not always easy though, but we're Christians, we're faith-based Christians who have an affinity for living our lives for the Lord and for providing a space for our son to grow up in the love of the Lord, to see that emulated through the way that I treat his mother and the way that she respects me and lives in community with me is like such an amazing and fascinating place to where we are right now. He's actually turns 8 months tomorrow,
wow.
so he's up on his knees and gorilla posing, and he sits and he's starting to get some hard food and just chew on some different things, and um none of that would be here hadn't I had the wherewithal to just one day wake up after a bender and say, I don't want to be this anymore. There's
Yeah.
more to this for me. I know that there's more out there for me than what I have right now. And it's never going to be given to me. So I got to go and get it. And if I want it, I can create it and I'll have it.
Well, it sounds to me, and for everyone who's hearing this, is, you know, there's a lot of power in choice, and those choices could either lead you in the right direction or in the other direction. And what's so beautiful about Isaac's story is that he had enough of living in one lifestyle, almost wanted to honor his family, both lineages on both sides, and join the military. And from that, God put him on a path to do something he always had a passion for. And now coming full circle, being with your wife and having a son now is something that you cherish even more because it's something you did not have growing up. So you're
Yeah.
starting a whole new chapter in your book of fatherhood and being a husband. And I tell you what, I would love to do a podcast with you in about a year just to kind of hear the life lessons that you've learned from both those arenas of life, and how impactful it is, and how important of being present with both entities, your wife and your child, and God bless future children as well. So,
Yeah.
Isaac, I'll is there anything you want to end to just tell anyone who's listening to your wonderful story?
Um, I all I can say is that I love you. I'm so
That's
thankful
great.
for you, John. I'm so appreciative of you. And from the short period of time that we've gotten to spend together, I'm proud to know you. And I'm just super blessed to have you in my circle. And I'm very thankful.
Well,
And,
when you have go ahead.
and I would just say that, like, yeah, my wife and I talk about breaking the cycle a lot because she comes from a divorced family as well. and how painful that is for young individuals to go through. Somehow, if her and we talk about this at length, can have a positive impact on young couples or young individuals who are thinking about wanting to get married or have found a spouse, um, but are struggling and don't know which way to go. If we can have any sort of positive impact and speak life and just prayer over those individuals, um, we graciously take that on. Like we've truly been blessed to be where we are in life, and my wife's story is just as amazing as mine, and for us to be in the place where we are now, we're just selflessly serving this world. And that's where we find so much beauty, and our passion lies in just selflessly serving. Material stuff comes and goes. Yeah, it's nice to have a nice car, it's nice to have a nice house. But at the end of the day, if all of this stuff disappears from our lives, Morgan and I have a love that's so strong, wrapped up in our son, that we'll have the means to get back whatever we need to provide for him and to continue to maintain a beautiful love between us. And if we can share that with anybody in the world, and we can take anybody under our wing to help support that in any capacity, we're always looking for ways to be able to breathe life into it.
Dude, that's beautiful, man. And I see that for you and your wife in the future, besides the great work that you're doing in pheasants and hunting and being in nature. But I feel God's anointing you to also help heal people who are in relationships, but also maybe not to counsel them to not go through that path of destruction of divorce. And I know that does happen, but I feel that you and your wife would definitely be great counselors for individuals who need counseling. So that's another chapter that your life could have. So really, what Isaac, and I'll end it here, is this: is your story is so beautiful because of your perseverance and fortitude and love and service for others. And if we could all imitate the way that Jesus was here on earth, and the words in red, and know that sacrifice is part of serving, is that sometimes in life we have to sacrifice to see what true love is about. So, to end with Isaac's story is, find your passion in life, go all in on it, and make sure that when you have that passion, make sure that it's aligned with serving and loving others. And just like you said so beautifully, is love is always the center of God's heart. And if we resonate in that circle, you can never go wrong. So, Isaac,
Amen, brother.
dude, it was a blessing to have you on today. Anyone, please like, share, and follow Isaac. I'll put everything in the show notes. And Isaac, all I can say to you is, dude, I'm honored as well. I'm grateful for your friendship, and I know that your journey is just beginning in different venues, and you're anointed to do those. So I'm so proud of you, brother.
Thank you, sir.
All right, everyone. You heard it first on the John Gardina Classroom, and this class is dismissed.